On the front things are going well, not at the pace that the Sofa warriors wanted, but at a pace that corresponds to the offensive's capabilities at the moment. The Russians are stuck in the north, the Ukrainians have liberated Rabotino and are now moving along the Kopany-Verbove line, to expand the breakthrough zone and avoid flank attacks. The occupation troops held on to Robotino tooth and claw, and no wonder. Robotino was in fact a stronghold on the border between the first and second line of defense. His loss to the enemy is the exit of Ukrainian forces on the route 0408 to break through the second line of defense, despite the fact that on the flanks were already hammered wedges. In fact, now in this very location, the Russian defense in the Zaporizhia region, which is cracking at the seams, is starting to crack the loudest, although it would seem, why should it? After all, the Zaporizhia group of troops east, numbering about 100,000 personnel composition, is 3 or more times larger than the advancing Ukrainian forces. In addition, the second line of defense in depth of 15 to 20 kilometers, while the first line of defense on average had a depth of 5 kilometers. Does the Russian command really have anything to worry about, having a defense line 3 times deeper than the one that Ukraine's assault forces have been breaking through for 2.5 months? Yes, and here's why. The first line of defense is the most difficult obstacle of all for the advancing forces. Largely because these are minefields, dotted with trenches and ditches under enemy fire. Minefields and enemy positions impede the advance of the attacking forces, while artillery provides additional support. In the second line of defense, the number of minefields is many times less, but there is a concentration of mechanized component, tanks, armored fighting vehicles, artillery. And it is with this component the offensive side has no less problems than with the minefields of the first line, but there is a nuance. Now along the route 0408 Russian troops have concentrated an incredible number of units to counter the breakthrough of the Ukrainian liberation forces. They are paratroopers, marines, artillerymen, intelligence and territorial troops. In general, the mass is impressive, but shabby, and as of now critically understaffed. In other words, they simply do not have the required amount of equipment to meet the needs and characteristics of holding the second line of defense. Back at the beginning of the year, when describing the situation with the enemy's manning of bridgeheads, I noted that in the south they are in one of the worst positions. After 2.5 months of active fighting, the situation has deteriorated even more. That is, they will not be able to fully hold the second line. And now, faced with a situation where the main resource that should hold back the enemy along the second line of defense is simply not available in sufficient quantity, the Russian command continues to panic. And after all, it was only Robotino that was liberated, not Starominivka, which is just around the corner. Imagine a defensive line that breaks through in 2 places at once. Breaking apart in a way that even plugging a single breach with forces is simply not enough. But the most interesting thing in this situation is that it can break in one more place. But we'll talk about that later, but for now, we're watching Autobahn 0408.